Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope you're well. I hope you had an amazing weekend. I had a wonderful weekend again with you guys in the comments during the live stream. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you need to subscribe absolutely right now. So you are ready and raring to go for next weekend where I will be live for qualifying for the race and we will be watching together, reacting together in the chat. It was absolutely amazing to do so. Now I'm going to go through the whole grid because there is so much to talk about front to back. I'm going to start at the back and make sure you watch all the way to the end because, of course, I will be discussing George Russell after this weekend. And I'm going to be honest, I'm just too upset to talk about him first. So first off, let's talk about Max Verstappen, the happy end of the grid, the front end of the grid. And Max Verstappen was so incredibly professional during this race. It was one of those races where I think if we look back at the end of the season and he has won this title, which I think he's going to, but if he has won the World Drivers' Championship, we look back at this race here as a real turning point, as a pure professionalism drive, as one of those drives that you get from a world champion in a world champion winning season where he just dominates absolutely from start to finish. It never looked like Hamilton was going to get anywhere near him, and it was incredibly, incredibly good from him. Alongside him, Perez, not the best weekend. I think Perez is just wishing that this race was 1 or 2 laps longer. Honestly, he was catching Bottas as a rate of knots at the end of the Grand Prix. I just wish it was 1 lap longer and then we could have really seen a fight between them. But honestly, another good performance from Perez in that second Red Bull, and I think we're going to see him on a podium next weekend. I think he's probably going to learn from this, take a little bit away with it, and then get back on that podium next weekend, joined by Max Verstappen in some way. Let's also talk about Mercedes very quickly at the front end. Not too much to talk about Mercedes. They were good, not good enough. Like, it was a solid performance from Hamilton. I don't really get this negativity around Hamilton's performance. Like, if the car isn't there, the car isn't there. Max Verstappen just drove down the road and Hamilton had nothing to reply with it. Similar to Bottas, Hamilton just drove away from Bottas. And again, Bottas had no real way of answering what was in front of him. A little bit lucky, you could say, to get that third place with Perez just gaining and gaining and gaining. But Bottas at the same time, he had to put those laps together. He made it fairly comfortable after getting past Norris at the beginning of the Grand Prix. That was kind of it for the Mercedes guys. They didn't really have too much going on. I think it's the midfield where it really gets quite tasty. If we look at the actual statistics in terms of the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship, my goodness, it is getting tasty for Lando bloody Norris. He is there, 86 points, still ahead of Bottas, let's just say. And he had another delectable race. It was an incredibly good race from Norris and an incredibly good weekend. You know, qualified exceptionally well, got himself in the position where he could make the race pretty comfortable for himself. Yes, should he have put up a little bit more of a battle with Bottas and Perez? Possibly. But actually, if we look at it, he still finished a lap behind those top 4. Those top 4 were just absolutely in a league of their own. And you've got to remember, it's a very short lap around this ring, and therefore the Red Bull ring lends itself to lots of drivers being lapped, being overtaken, and Norris was the closest of the midfield, and I can't think that you can really give him much negativity for that. He was very, very good indeed. Ferrari, on the other hand, had a bit of a topsy-turvy weekend. Now, I'm going to talk about Leclerc first, because he actually won Driver of the Day, and I don't really know how. So he broke his front wing, in a little bit of a collision with Gasly at the beginning of the Grand Prix, and basically just ruined his race from there onwards, or at least it looked like he was going to ruin his race from there onwards. In the other car, though, Carlos Sainz put one of the most professional performances together I think you're ever going to see. It was incredibly good from Carlos Sainz. He managed to undercut everybody in the pit stops, managed to get in front of everybody else in the midfield, and drove exceptionally well. And if it wasn't for a slow Lewis Hamilton, he would have probably caught Norris towards the end of the race, and we'd have maybe seen a little bit of an old McLaren teammate rivalry battle between the two of them, and that would have been lovely, lovely to see. But as I said, he got caught up a little bit in the traffic, driving from P12 to P6 and looking very, very good. Carlos Sainz was my driver of the day, and I know he wasn't in the top 3 drivers of the day and therefore didn't get into the tier list that I put up on the channel earlier, but for me, Carlos Sainz was the driver of the day. Possibly the best driver we're going to see out of him this season. Very, very good. I know he's got the podium, but I think this performance was even better than that podium performance that he put together. Leclerc did a really good job at saving what looked like was going to be a really, really tough race. Obviously, as it says in this picture here, or as it shows, had to sort of change that front wing very early on, put himself on a completely different strategy to everyone else, and made it work. You know, he's still got a 2-stopper in technically, although I guess stopping in the first lap, can you really count that as a pit stop fully? It doesn't help you in the same way that other pit stops do later on in the race, but it sort of came to fruition for him. Drove very, very well, got past the back markers very easily, and some really lovely overtakes from Leclerc, what you'd expect when he was in a much faster car on the weekend than the people he was coming up against in the rest of the midfield. AlphaTauri is the next place I'm going to stop by just because they are next in the Drivers' Championship. And if we do have a quick look at where Gasly and Tsunoda finished, Gasly unfortunately not on there. So Gasly did really, really well, qualified exceptionally well again. And then I don't really know what happened at the start. I don't know if any of you guys can leave a comment and let me know a little bit more detail. It just looked like he got it completely wrong. He was so slow off the start. And then obviously goes wide, goes off the track, collides with Leclerc, collides with Giovinazzi, collides with Latifi. It just all goes wrong. His tyres completely wrecked, and the car and the race is over for him before it really even started. You know, it's probably going to be one of the worst starts, one of the worst races we're ever going to see for Gasly, possibly in his career. And then Tsunoda, on the other side of things, was very, very good indeed. You know, Tsunoda picking up another point there, putting himself on 9 points. And I think if we just look at this table in general, Tsunoda really needs to start catching Stroll and Ocon for me. I think he needs to put his name in and amongst those drivers there, because he's got 5 points less than Stroll at this point, 3 points less than Ocon. That's definitely catchable. Probably next weekend, if he can put together another lightning performance like we saw in Bahrain. I know he's getting closer and closer to maybe reproducing that. Baku was a pretty good race apart from the spinning qualifying, and then France was absolutely atrocious. So now getting a little bit of rhythm back together is Tsunoda, and maybe can put a little bit more together. But it doesn't help when Gasly's tyre shreds itself completely, and then all of the sort of emphasis of AlphaTauri's weekend falls on Tsunoda. Luckily, he was pretty clean. A good weekend overall, and not too bad. Aston Martin sort of became business as usual, didn't it? Like, they were going for points. Stroll managed to do the business, managed to finish in the top 10 in 8th position. They sort of went for another sort of weird strategy, I guess you could say, compared to everyone else. They didn't quite go for everyone else's strategy. They always mix it up a little bit, and I think that's quite nice from Aston Martin, that we see those sort of different strategies from them. But it didn't quite work out fully over the course of the weekend. I think they'll be happy with an 8th place in Stroll. I think Vettel will be a little bit disappointed. It looked like he had a bit of momentum going. Obviously, an exceptional race in Monaco, an even better race in Baku, another very good race in France from Vettel. I think he'd have wanted to keep that ball rolling, to keep that momentum going. But business as usual for Aston Martin. They were pretty good overall. Alpine. My goodness me. Alpine. Fernando Alonso having a pretty good time at Alpine at the moment. But apart from that, and someone put this perfectly in the comments, they are a practice catfish. They looked so quick in free practice 1, 2, and 3. They looked insanely fast. And everyone was talking about possibility of Alpine being in the top 5, possibly sort of qualifying in and amongst when Norris and Gasly ended up qualifying. And it came to qualifying, and they were nowhere. They were just absolutely nowhere. Ocon finished the race in 14th position. Ocon now has 12 points. Alonso 19 points. And they're now sort of slowly drifting away from AlphaTauri and Aston Martin, aren't they? You know, Aston Martin and AlphaTauri are continually finishing in and amongst the points, and a little bit further up than Alpine as well. Ocon has fallen off a cliff. If I sort of had Sainz as my driver of the day, Ocon was definitely my anti-driver of the day. He was really, really poor overall, and just not got it together, has he? Not really got it together all in all. And you can't really feel that bad for him, because he's been given that contract. Whether that's sort of gone into his mindset, he's maybe put a bit more pressure on himself to be like Mr. Alpine, and it's just not coming to fruition for him. I think Ocon needs something in the next couple of weekends to put him back in the right mindset, to put him back in the Alpine car in a positive aspect. Daniel Ricciardo needs a very similar thing. You could argue exactly the same for Daniel Ricciardo. a bit of a free practice catfish from Daniel Ricciardo. He looked so good and started so well, got himself up into P9. And if you haven't seen the onboard for that first lap from Daniel Ricciardo, it is exquisite. It is something of beauty. He's putting moves in on people. He's getting past people with ease. It's really, really lovely to see. And I think he could have made waves in this race had it not been for the issue that he had. Like, his car just gave up on him. And again, you can't really blame him for that. It's not his fault that just completely, I think it was a power unit glitch, completely cost him all of that good work, dropped him back down to where he was. And by the time the car sort of looked like it was coming back to life a little bit, it was all over. He was way too far behind everybody else and just ended up finishing a lowly 13th behind the likes of Vettel, just in front of Ocon actually. But again, not an amazing race from Daniel Ricciardo, and the struggle just continues to get worse and worse for him. Alfa Romeo, not too much to report, apart from an absolutely amazing drive from Kimi Räikkönen, though I feel like I say this every single time I do a race review. Kimi Räikkönen was really, really good. Finished 11th. And again, another race where someone else in front of him misses out on the points, has a bad race, maybe has an issue, and he's got himself back into another points position. Yeah, Kimi Räikkönen, absolutely amazing. And Giovinazzi, it was never going to go well when he had that touch with Gasly to begin with. Yeah, sort of ruined any sort of Giovinazzi run that he could have gone on. Ended up in 15th. Not great for Alfa Romeo overall, apart from Kimi just putting it together. And a lovely livery they had this weekend. I think if we're going to take the real positive away, an absolutely beautiful little livery they put together for their 111th birthday. We've then got the Haas cars. Ooh, not George Russell yet. Not George Russell yet. We've got the Haas cars, and they had a great inter-team battle, but again, it's nothing more than an inter-team battle. If we look at sort of where they are now, Haas nowhere to be seen in and amongst these cars here, and therefore Haas 10th in the Constructors' Championship. Mick Schumacher still 18th in the drivers, and getting ahead of a Williams, even though the Williams car doesn't look great itself, is pretty good. I'd be surprised if we see Haas get any points over the course of this season. Like, looking at the table here, can I see sort of maybe 5 or 6 of these drivers having a really, really bad weekend for Mick to be able to pick up a point, or Mazepin to be able to pick up a point? I don't personally think so. I think it's going to be a little bit of a difficult season for the Haas guys. And by the way, if you haven't seen it as well, it was absolutely hilarious that Gunther Steiner bought Mazepin a spinning top and called him Mazespin. It was exquisite. It was beautiful. It was Gunther all the way to the bank. And it was just so much worth a Google if you haven't already seen it. Now we talk about the main man, George Russell. Is he actually cursed? Is he actually cursed? 2 weekends in a row, he has put himself in an exquisite position. In France, he finished 12th. And again, how often is it that all 20 cars finish a Grand Prix? It doesn't happen as often as you would imagine, to be fair. It's not often that all 20 cars finish, and George Russell put himself 12th, so close to a points finish, drove incredibly well in France, and he took that momentum into this weekend, was literally thousandths of a second, 8 thousandths of a second away from getting into Q3, which would have just been amazing. Would have just been amazing if he could start in Q3. Obviously, Tsunoda had the incident in qualifying, actually started 11th, meaning George Russell started in the top 10. He started in the points, and did he disappoint? No. Got himself up into 8th position and looked comfortable. At one point, I thought he was going to make some moves on Alonso. It was looking like he was maybe going to battle for 7th place, and let's be honest, he looked comfortable in 8th place. I don't think Tsunoda was going to get past him easily. We're looking at the likes of Stroll. I don't think was going to get past him very easily. I think Sainz would have got ahead of him eventually. But yeah, he looked very, very comfortable in 8th place. And he looked very, very comfortable in a points position in a car that is nowhere near it, by the way. Like, if we compare Latifi's performances over the course of this season, George Russell is not just getting every single millimetre out of this Williams car. He's getting every nanometer. He is getting absolutely the pinnacle of performance from this Williams, and he was so close. Should have been a points finish. I don't really know what it was. Something on the side pod, the pressure on the side pod. It was a slow pit stop, and then it just fell apart, didn't it? The slow pit stop meant he was out of the points, and after that I was a bit dejected. And then to see him have to retire was just heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking. I was broken inside. I don't know. There's something about George Russell that I just absolutely love, and I want to see him do well, and I want to see him achieve in the sport, and I think he deserves it. He's put so much effort into this Williams team, and he was so lovely about it. Oh my goodness. George Russell, next weekend, he's got to get himself into this sort of mindset where it is next weekend. We looked so incredibly professional. We looked like an 8th place car. Can we get there again? Like, he just needs to go again. And I'm so glad he's only got to wait a week. I'm so glad that it's at the same place, a place where he knows he's got that pace. He can go in with confidence, with style, and know that he can get a result. But George Russell, my goodness, he needs a point. Needs a point, please, please. 2 points would be absolutely sensational. Final note, though, Max Verstappen, I think, is going to be the World Drivers' Champion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know your overall thoughts on the race. Who is your driver of the day? Who is your anti-driver of the day? Who would you like to see win next weekend in Austria? Do you think we're going to see much of the same, where those 4 cars, the Red Bulls and Mercedes, just sort of run away from it? Or do you think we're going to see something completely different? I've heard a possible rumour that there might actually be rain in this one. Fingers crossed that there is rain. Start doing your rain dance right now. Whilst you're doing that rain dance, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. And I will see you next time for some more not applicable Formula 1 action.